Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, I think the goal for today, we're going to do some news and notes. We're going to move on to edge rusher. We're going to do edge 1, 2, 3, and 4, and kind of look at, like we have the last several days, the top-end talent as well as the depth, and how it compares to the rest of the NFL, how our 1 compares to their 1s, our 2s to their 2s, etc., etc. As for the news and notes, still not anything massively crazy going on, but Matthew Stafford thing has taken another step beyond just speculation. He has now been allowed to speak to other teams and kind of see what they'd be willing to offer. The general consensus is that, this is a common tactic to, let me put it this way. Apparently right now, both sides want to get this done. I think the problem is that Matthew Stafford is underpaid based on his performance last year. He's not even in the top 10, and he played certainly well beyond his contract. The problem is he's not really going to get the kind of contract that he feels he should get, as though he played at that level as a 27-year-old. And so there's a gap, and whenever there's a gap, a lot of times what you do is you say, okay, you go talk and see what's out there. It's a way to bring resolution, because the team is saying you're not worth that, and Stafford is saying I'm worth more than that. And so you go out and find out what your value is by gauging the market. You go talk to other teams and you find out what your value is, and then you come back. And you either come back with your tail between your legs, or you come back saying, see, I got receipts. And so it's kind of a way to settle an argument and then decide where you want to go from there. Now, if Matthew Stafford does end up winning the argument, there's a good chance that the Rams are going to say, I'm sorry, we can't pay that, or we're not going to pay that. That may not be the case. They may meet that number, but it's certainly possible. And, in a year where the draft is not very strong, you may find teams being a little bit more willing to overpay for a guy like Stafford and maybe give him the kind of contract that he'd be worth, turning a blind eye to some of his age and injury history stuff. But I think it's fair to say don't overreact. I think it's also fair to say that this isn't just nothing. It is a step in a direction. It definitely shows that there is a gap between the two teams, and it's at this point irreconcilable. And so they're going to go to the sort of mediation tactic of going out and finding out a number, and then they're going to come back and they're going to talk again. I don't know how long something like this would take. It's probably going to be a long, drawn-out process. Tom Pelissero was talking, and, there's a question about, could this even get done? This process, could this even be done by the time free agency starts? I would assume it could, because other teams also want to get this sorted out by the time free agency starts, so they know what they're doing, teams that need quarterbacks and whatnot. So they certainly would want to facilitate this as quickly as possible, get back to them with whatever negotiations they'd have to go through and whatnot. But it's certainly a move in it's another half a step in a direction, and that direction is there may be a breakup between the Rams and Stafford, and it would make some sense. It's not the greatest time to do this because, again, you're not going to get much right now. But if the breakup's coming next year anyway, there's something to be said for possibly splitting early rather than splitting late. They're already moving on from guys like Cooper Kupp, so there's kind of a rebuild feel to things. Not entirely, obviously. You still got some young studs and whatnot, but at some point you got to rip this Band-Aid off, and a lot of teams struggle with that. And if you can reach a number, fine, but you can't just keep kicking this can down the road. And I say that to everybody that's saying that there's nothing here. Well, there is reason to believe that there is a scenario where there's a split here. And the biggest reason is they know it's coming anyway. So go out and get you some compensation. See what you can do. Obviously, the most interesting dynamic for us in this regard, aside from just tracking an NFC team, is the question of would they go along with somebody like Aaron Rodgers? Could he possibly go to L.A.? Rodgers is out in California. He's working out. He's staying healthy. Doesn't seem necessarily like a guy that's contemplating retirement. He may be, but usually he's off doing peyote in the mountains or something with the Dalai Lama. contemplating life. And, right now he's in California in the lab, putting in work, getting his body in good physical condition. So I'm guessing he's prepping himself for some interviews. In other news, Joel Bitonio, guard for the Cleveland Browns, is contemplating retirement. He says he's undecided on whether or not he'll be back in 2025. Again, pointing to Cleveland just needing to entirely blow it up. On that note, one of the guys that we've talked about in terms of keeping an eye on was officially released. Bengals released defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins. So there is another defensive tackle in the pot. Not a super appealing one. He's played for 3 different teams in the last 3 years. He's played for 5 teams in the last 6 years or something like that. He's 31 years old. Played about a half a season last year and had one of his worst years. He's also really not much of a pass rusher. Never really has been. Not much of a run defender either. But again, as I've been saying, it's not as much about that. It's kind of just about let's flood as many people into the market as we can and hope that kind of drops a little bit of the prices. And not even just at defensive tackle, because I don't know that there's any real defensive tackles at this point that I'm super over the moon about. But, let's have some people spend some money on other positions so we can focus on the ones we want. You got teams like the Arizona Cardinals that have recently come out and said we're going to be very active in free agency. So there's going to be a lot of competition. The Panthers released cornerback Dane Jackson. Dane Jackson is a little bit more appealing insofar as he's not 31 years old. However, he's also not a very good football player, so there's that. It's not a no entirely, but he played about a half a season last year. It was the second half, and he was terrible, probably due to injury stuff, but he's never been super great. With that said, however, he played 4 years at Buffalo. His worst coverage grade was a 54, which is just below average, and 2023 it was a 71. So he's not very good, and I don't really have any desire in bringing him in. He could maybe add a little bit of something. I mean, to be clear, these are roughly Green Bay Packers cornerback grades right now anyway, so if you need some depth or whatever for basically free, okay, fine, but there's nothing massively appealing about Dane Jackson for those that have been wondering. Kind of an odd and random note here from Albert Breer. He was on Colin Cowherd's show going over some, basic Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford stuff. Talking about the Minnesota Vikings, he said, the Vikings are very comfortable with J.J. McCarthy right now. There's a little question about him putting on some weight, so that's something we're going to have to watch over the next few weeks. But they really like what they've seen from J.J. McCarthy. He pushed Darnold in August. He made at least a conversation in August, whatever that means. So very odd, very random, but definitely interesting enough. It's probably nothing. But these things are a concern for teams, especially when you look at the NFL draft and whatnot, because it kind of just comes down to effort. If you're putting on weight, you're probably not doing what you need to do nutritionally and in the weight room and everything else. And if you're not doing that, you're probably not doing what you need to do in the film room, although that's not necessarily true. As for the Chicago Bears, they actually started releasing people, which Bears fans are not super excited about. They're all excited about adding a bunch of people in free agency. And so far, they've started going the other way. The Bears started by releasing tight end Gerald Everett. This one was quite a bit less of a surprise. It was one of Shane Waldron's guys, obviously not their top tight end. But when Shane Waldron left, you've got $5.5 million in savings with Gerald Everett if you let him go. He's 31 years old, or at least will be pretty soon. That one was somewhat expected. The one that people seem to be the most upset about is that they released edge rusher DeMarcus Walker. It says the Bears already have plenty of cap space. The move plus Gerald Everett's release will put them above $70 million in cap space as free agency approaches. Walker signed a 3-year, $21 million contract in Chicago 2 off seasons ago. He totaled 7 sacks with the Bears and started all 17 games last year. Walker will have some takers in free agency, though he will likely be re-signed to a 1 or 2 year deal this time around. DeMarcus Walker is not a premier player, but the interesting thing about it, and having just gone through the edge rushers, I noticed this, they don't have any premier talent. They don't have any top-end talent at all. In fact, you could argue that this was their best pass rusher last year, or their best edge rusher, I should say, last year. Not that that's saying much, but seriously, they just didn't have a ton going on. So it really just kind of thins you out unnecessarily. Now, it probably points to them being pretty aggressive in free agency and will probably be targeting edge in free agency as well. But it is just a little bit surprising that they did that. As for us, would there be any interest? I doubt it. He is 30 years old. He really has never had a very good season in his career. His most sacks in a season was 8, and that was a very fluky season because he only played about a half a season with Tennessee and still had double what he's done the last 2 years, which is 4 sacks. This past year, 39 pressures and 4 sacks on 415 attempts. And as far as his run defense, he had a 62 grade. So, I mean, he might be in and around the Kingsley and Igbare range in terms of talent, but add in again that he's 30 years old, and I just don't see why there would be any real appeal. I'm just happy to see the Bears are purging people, and we added somebody else to the pool. And then finally, in regards to non-Packers news, Devondre Campbell has been going on an absolute tirade on social media. He seems to do this once in a while. He pops up, makes a comment, somebody makes fun of him, and then he spends the next week screaming at everybody about how much he doesn't care about people's opinions, which obviously is pretty hilarious in and of itself. I mean, if you look at his timeline, he posted once on January 9th, everybody's playing both sides. I don't trust nothing but myself, this money, and my... I don't know what that word is, so I'm just not going to say it. I don't need to get myself in trouble. Then he just posted like laughing, crying faces February 9th. So a month later, he retweeted Antonio Brown. Don't really know the context, but that was it. Then February 21st is the next time he tweeted anything. He pops up and says, Keith Armstrong was one of a kind. I'm so glad I came into the NFL when I did. All that soft baby and player stuff didn't exist. I'll never forget his fame line, you want to be cute or you want to be good. If you know, you know. Well, obviously, people in the comments started attacking him for calling players soft babies, essentially, considering he started crying and walking out on his own team. Not literally crying, but that's what he did. Well, he really didn't like that. And instead of tweeting once a month, he hung out for a while. I'm gonna try to cut out all the swears as best as I can. Listen, I'm sick of all you BANs jumping under my tweets. It's been 2 months, and I have yet to address the situation because I know the truth and don't care to clear anything up. I'm by myself all the time. If you or any of them BANs from the 49ers feel some. By the way, there's probably a reason you're by yourself all the time, Devondre. He commented on his own comment saying, type of way, go, if you're feeling some type of way, go which you move when you see me, because all them ends that had so much to say about me gonna have to stand on them words next time I see them. I've been standing on business my whole life, and it's gonna be like that until the day I'm 6 feet under. PANs don't know me. Which is funny that now he's threatening to fight people. It's like, okay. I mean, you could beat him up for saying what he said. I don't know that changes anything. And he goes on to say, that goes for all them old A retired ends that jumped on TV speaking on my name when they could have reached out to me and heard it from the horse's mouth, but they just took what the 49ers said and ran with it. Y'all ends P to F all of y'all. Which, you know... Devondre, dude, nobody needed to call you. We watched what you did on national television. What do you mean? Call you up to get your side of what really happened? Bro, we watched it happen. There's no clarification needed. We get it. And you're talking about former football players. I don't know. I'm not a former NFL player, so I couldn't tell you. But I have a feeling there is no excuse. Whatever it is that got you in your feelings... Every player has dealt with that. And you know what they didn't do? Walk out on their team mid-game. Unless you're Antonio Brown, that is. Somebody says something to the effect of, you can't address the situation because you can't defend yourself. There's no excuse. Anyways, he says, I ain't addressing S. I'm richer and never have to work another day in my life. And I told Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch that when they FaceTime me and beg me to come out there an hour after Green Bay cut me and are really sparing ends, I play because I want to. Okay, well, you are addressing it. So as far as I'm not addressing anything, that's not correct. Then he says, well, I'm rich and I can do whatever I want. And that's what I told Kyle Shanahan, which, by the way, if that's true, if they did a FaceTime and he says, I'm rich, I'll do whatever I want and I'll play because I feel like it, probably your own fault for bringing this guy on your team. And then he says, they get mad when they can't successfully troll you. I'm pretty sure everybody has successfully trolled the living crap out of you. That's why you're pissed and tweeting like crazy. I'm a real N and you can't get under my skin. My life is great. I get on here and say whatever I want. Then I log off and go on with my day. Well, I'll sit here mad. With that being said, I hope everyone has a great Friday. Oh, thank you, Devondre. That's so nice of you. Freaking random. But again, he's saying that he's doing the exact opposite of what he's doing. I get on here, say what I want, and I log off. Except you got on here, said what you want. Somebody made fun of you. They did get under your skin, and so you spent the rest of the day tweeting about how much you don't care about people and how you're rich and you don't have to care or whatever, which, if it was true, you wouldn't have commented anything. So anyways, that was fun. It looks like he's about done with that, but that was a good time. Moving on to a little bit of Packers news here. The Jaguars officially hired James Gladstone as their general manager, so we dodged a bullet on that one. It means John Eric Sullivan will be staying with the Green Bay Packers, so that is fantastic news. But all right, let's take a break. We'll come back and do edge rushers, and then we'll see what we do after that. We might do NFL draft. We might do some calls. We'll see. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk edge. First of all, let's take a peek at the Green Bay Packers so we're all clear on this. The top four that we're talking about, again, just a refresher, the process that I went through. Top four in snap counts are considered your starters, and then from 1 to 4, I did best player. So in this case, the four in order are Rashawn Gary, then Brenton Cox, then Kingsley, then Lucas Van Ness, with Aaron Mosby not making the cut. Based on snap counts, he would have been number 3 on the list. Rashawn Gary ended the season with a 73 PFF grade. That ranks him 20th among number 1 edge rushers, so obviously not as good as we need him to be. As I've said, I am hopeful that he'll have a bounce-back year next year, but I have no way of knowing that. Edge 2, who is Brenton Cox, actually ranks 13th among edge 2s. Edge 3, we've got Kingsley Enagbare, who ranks 22nd. Even among number 3 edge rushers, he ranks 22nd. So that's garbage. And then Lucas Van Ness, which is beyond disappointing because, first of all, the fact that we're even categorizing him as an edge 4 is a disappointment. The fact that he's not destroying all other edge 4s, which, by the way, the number 1 edge 4 has a 65 grade. So in order for him to be the number 1 edge 4, he would have to have a 65. Just a tie, a 65.1 to have that title all to himself, and he doesn't have that. That's super disappointing. He ranks 15th. He is a middle-of-the-pack edge 4. So there you go. If we look at our top 2 edge rushers, which would be, in this case, Rashawn Gary and Brenton Cox, if we put those two out there, our edge duo would rank 19th among top 2s. Among the top 3, we rank 21st. And if you look at the top 4, we rank 21st. It's not a good group. Now, my hope, let me pull this up real quick. I'm going to do something slightly different. My hope is that Rashawn Gary has a little bit of a bounce back. Now, I'm going to go very little and let's just say he does what he did last year and has a 79 PFF grade. On top of that, let's say we do get Khalil Mack. All right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to, first of all, well, I guess if we're going to be super honest, we can't dump Lucas Van Ness. So it's going to... Well, whatever. Kind of throws a wrench in thing, but I'm just going to get rid of Brenton Cox. But let's say we end up getting Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had a 90 PFF grade. It was not an outlier. He had a 92 the year before that. So if we put a 90 in that first spot, what does that do for us? Well, edge 1, we would rank 6th. Edge 2, with Rashawn Gary's bounce back, would rank 5th. And then edge 3 and 4 stay the same because I didn't remove them. It's still Kingsley and Lucas Van Ness. Now, obviously, there's a chance they could do better, but I'm going to leave it at that. All right? If we look at our top edge duo, the Packers would have the 4th best, behind only Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Houston. By the way, Philadelphia, 18th. So, again, the idea that Philadelphia just has the most elite defensive line, not really. Elite corners, yes. Elite defensive line, yeah, in the Super Bowl they did. Good defensive line, sure. If we look at our top 3 edge group, surprisingly, it doesn't get worse. We go up to 3rd. It's Pittsburgh, then Houston, then Green Bay, with an average, by the way. So our top 2 edge rushers would average an 84.5, with Pittsburgh being a 90, which is crazy. Our top 3 edge rushers would average a 75.27. And then if we look at our top 4, we just drop back down to 4th place. So we would be top 5 across the board, and that's all we need to do. Go get a stud, and Rashawn doesn't need to be elite. He needs to bounce back to just getting a little bit better. Go from your 71 back to a 79, which should not be hard to do. He already started to ascend. In fact, let's look at the second half of last year for Rashawn. I just arbitrarily went to week 11. He's right at a 79, which is exactly what I asked for. If we go back one more week, because I think that's closer to half, 77.6. So that's fine. 27 pressures and 5 sacks on 195 attempts, which is 27 divided by 195. It's a 14% pressure rate. He can absolutely do better than that, and has done better than that, 14%. But 14% is very good, especially if that's your number 2. So this is the easiest one in the world for me because these guys are available. There's no guarantee what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Lucas Van Ness explodes. Maybe Rashawn is just garbage. Maybe we get Khalil Mack and he falls off a cliff. Maybe we get Myles Garrett and he falls off a cliff or tears his ACL. You don't know what could possibly happen. But this one's easy. There are premier edge rushers out there. Go get the number 1. Because not only does that help your number 1 spot to where you are easily a top 10 number 1 pass rusher because those guys are available, but you have also a top 5 number 2 pass rusher in Rashawn Gary. You're going to have one of the best pass rush duos in football, and you're going to have one of the best pass rush groups in all of football. Not to mention, first of all, Lucas better get better. I'm talking as you need to be edge 3, and you need to at least compete among edge 3s. Give me like a 67 PFF grade or something. Be a decent run defender or something. Give me something to work with here. But also there's, first of all, you could do multiple guys in free agency like we did in 2019. We got 2 edge rushers. So that's a possibility to where you just immediately upgrade your depth with somebody, not a super premier guy, but you can do better than Kingsley and Lucas Van Ness were giving you, while still giving Lucas Van Ness an opportunity. If he steps up, then hey, we got 4 guys. On top of that, obviously the draft. Could be round 1, it doesn't have to be. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Undrafted free agents come in and compete. Bring in as much competition as you can to the room on top of adding the premier talent. But even if you do nothing else, if you get Khalil Mack, and assuming he doesn't just completely fall off a cliff, if you get Max Crosby, and that assumes he bounces back from his injury, because remember, he struggled last year, but it was immediately following his injury that caused him to struggle. And if we look at, where's my boy at, Max Crosby, look at him last year, 92 PFF grade, and on top of that, he's 27 years old, which is why he is my number 1 target, because Khalil is like cool for a little bit. Max Crosby could be cool for 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, Max Crosby and Rashawn can be a duo for the next 5 years. I don't think Khalil makes it that long. I don't know. He is a super freak. He's super freaky, but I don't know. Now, as far as the draft, we've kind of talked about the edge rush situation. There's a lot of really talented guys. There's also an expectation that there's going to be a run starting, mid top 10 to 20-ish. And how many of those guys are going to make it to the Packers to where they don't have to trade up kind of becomes the question. If some of them end up falling, there's a good chance the Packers will end up taking one, regardless of what they do in free agency. If not, there's a pretty good chance they go in another direction, corner, defensive line, what have you. With that said, there are a lot of them, especially if you look in that top 50 range, knowing the Packers could easily find somebody more appealing than what the consensus board does. So you got guys like Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, James Pierce, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green that are in that early range. And, whether they start at, again, like mid-top 10 or start outside of the top 10 could dictate a lot of where these guys end up going. However, there's also Nick Scorton, Jack Sawyer, Ezukaru out of Boston College, Uman Malin, never learned how to say his name, JT Tuimalau, Landon Jackson is at 52. It's kind of probably a little bit out there, but we'll see what happens as far as the combine goes. So, I mean, if you include him, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, with a couple of them that are probably out of range, but you factor in, preferences will decide who goes and who falls, on top of the possibility the Packers could fall in love with someone and trade up, which is another thing to consider. It feels like this wouldn't, I don't know. Who knows what the Packers would do? But knowing how much they love defensive line, knowing how desperate they are for edge rush help, and how much Brian Gutekunst loves these guys, there's a very good chance that there's 2 to 3 of these guys that Brian Gutekunst and his staff are obsessed with. And depending on who it is, let's say the league is obsessed with Jalen Walker. It doesn't necessarily feel like a huge guy for Gutekunst. Could be, absolutely could be. But the league goes for Jalen Walker and whoever else. Man, you start getting, Mike Green goes early, kind of a smaller school, whatever. Shamar Stewart starts to slip a little bit. I mean, he's already consensus 19. That's right within striking distance. Which one of these guys would need to fall to what point before Gutekunst says, I just can't pass it up? That obviously depends on who else is available. There could be, if there's no one else, he's moving. If there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, then maybe you just wait it out and see how it goes. But something else to keep in mind, there are a lot of premier players, and all it takes is for Gutekunst's list to narrow down to one, to be a guy that he really likes, to be a premium position, for Gutekunst to start working the phones and say, we're going up. And whether or not you think that we should be moving up or back or any of that, it doesn't matter. The question is, how does the board fall? And again, if you got one guy left, you're going to try to get him. And then if you can't, you probably trade back. It's not about predetermining before you go into the draft whether you want to move up or back. You might have a preference, but ultimately it comes down to however the board falls, and you just react to it. All right, let's take a break. We come back. Let's do some calls. I'm a little iffy on whether we have enough to do a full episode, and so we'll do that. Why don't we take a break? We'll be right back.
Yo, Brian, it's your uncle, Rico.
What's up?
Hey, buddy. I was listening. I'm like a week or so behind here, so I was listening to the pod, and I didn't know if you knew. You mentioned Dick Duran passed away.
Yeah.
And I almost had completely forgot he was the head coach of the Bears for a minute. I just remember him as being a Packers coach, and you didn't mention that when you said, and maybe you have since then. It's been a week or so. Like I said, it's like Valentine's Day. You're about to talk about Max Crosby here, I think. Anyways, I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't know, that Dick Duran was a Packers coach, DB's coach, for a couple years at least. I remember that from back in the day, and that's how I remember Dick Duran. He's not a forgettable guy. He had a certain look to him.
He did,
jaw
for sure.
Something. It's just easy to remember.
He's got a face.
Dick Duran. But anyways, yeah, that stinks. He got sick and passed away, or cancer or whatever. But yeah, that sucks. Anyways, I just want to let you know that you said you remembered him as the Bears coach. I remember him as the Packers coach. So, R.I.P. Dick. All right, go Pack, go.
Yeah, I think in the younger, I'm sure I heard his name as a Packers coach when I was a younger Packers fan in the mid '90s or whenever he would have been in Green Bay. but it certainly didn't stick out to me. My recollection was as a Bears head coach is how I always remembered him. Children dying. Okay, got that taken care of. Drew, what's going on?
Hey, Ryan, it's Drew from Green Bay. The other day, Beer Cheese Benny was asking about, like, tight ends that could be converted to wide receiver. And
yeah.
I'd just say, like, generally, tight ends don't have very good agility. So, like, what is good route running for a tight end is usually subpar for a wide receiver. And they usually don't have the same quickness. But if you were looking for, like, a receiving tight end, kind of like Musgrave or someone who can get split out wide from time to time, there's a Miami tight end, Arroyo, and then there's the, Fannin from Bowling Green, obviously. And also there's a Clemson tight end that he's like a smaller, I think he's like 130, 135 pounds. I forget his name, but those three guys, because of their smaller size and good hands, I'd say they would fill that role pretty well. And then in terms of like what the Packers are looking for, I just get the sense that we're probably, even though I think we could easily go O-line, I think we're going to avoid it early. And we can wait a year and see how things play out. And, we have Morgan in case we lose Walker. We can split Morgan out or however we want to shuffle things, or put Morgan at right tackle, Tom at left tackle. I think that would be an option. And then, you don't need to get a guard or a center early. So, and we still have Jenkins that can move all around. So, I think like a mid-round guy again, or maybe late-round guy. And then, so I'm really thinking defensive tackle. There's so many of them. We need one so badly that I just think that's what they're going to target. But I don't see a first-round wide receiver. I said that earlier, but yeah, what do you think about that? All right, bye.
No, I agree. I was going to when you said avoid offensive line, I was thinking entirely, and I was like, well, I don't know about all that because the Packers. You'd mentioned they might avoid it this year. They kind of did that last year, and they're famous for drafting 3 offensive linemen every single year, and so they took the entire year off last year. They're not going to do that again. So I would think, depth is becoming a problem on the offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if they do another 3 offensive linemen again, or at least 2. But you're probably right, it might not be early. Now, I wouldn't really be shocked if they did something early. I would be maybe a little surprised round 1. Starting round 2, it's kind of all bets are off, in my opinion. But we'll see how it goes. And then, as far as tight end, I mean, essentially what Beer Cheese was, what you're looking for is a tweener. That's all we're talking about. Our tight ends where you're kind of like, I don't know. You suck as a blocker for sure, but you might be a little stiff for a wide receiver, and it's just a question of do we fall on the side of receiver, kind of like an Alan Lazard type, where I'd rather have you be a stiff receiver than a freaking inline blocker at any point ever. So, it's a very specific thing, and I couldn't tell you. You gave a good list of guys. I couldn't tell you exactly who that would be, but obviously you're just looking for the smallest, most athletic guys that are closer to being receivers than anything else. But I don't know. It's kind of a random thing to specifically be looking for. It's like, what if we found a corner, but we turned him into a safety? Like, what if? I don't know. I don't know.
What's going on, Omar Firefighter? How y'all doing?
What's up?
Not to keep on talking about the Super Bowl,
Oh,
but there's
no.
just one thing I think I haven't heard mentioned yet. I'm about like maybe 2 episodes behind, so maybe somebody mentioned it. But it's a key element that a lot of people forget.
All right.
That the NFL does not pay anybody to do Super Bowl. So it's literally you're doing it for free, and almost kind of like we're just saying I did the Super Bowl and for like advertising. Like you'll have a national stage to advertise your music to get more streams, to get more money. So when you talk about superstars, a lot of them turn it down because you're not getting paid. It's like you got to pay for everything. If you do the pyrotonics, you got to pay for that. You got dances, you got to pay for that. So you got to be up of a certain amount of popularity to actually afford to do the halftime show. Then you have to be popular enough for them to want you. So it's a happy medium, I guess unhappy medium that you have to have. So I like the idea that I heard somebody say, like, it'd be nice if you did like local artists. The problem with that would be the local artists don't have money to actually provide a good show. Two, they try to pick somebody that has a good track record, because if they don't have a good track record, they might do something crazy like Janet Jackson with her old breast, you flashed the titty. So, and she did that for publicity, which she got, and then she got banned. But so you gotta have somebody like that, going to have people want to watch, but also have a good track record. I think like Lil Wayne was mad he didn't get picked. But he kind of messed up some previous shows. Like he didn't show up, or he came and he might have been like not performing it at his best, for lack of a better word. So they kind of shied away from that. So you gotta have a happy medium. I would love a Metallica halftime show because they got popular again because of Stranger Things. Like all the people who did not know who Metallica was. All these kids now listen to Metallica because of Stranger Things, which I kind of was happy and mad at because I'm like, y'all don't know, but then I'm also happy that, you can play that and people know what you're listening to. So, a lot of people have to realize that you're not going to always get this person, or the best of the best, because, like, Metallica can go make money doing their own show instead of spending their own money. So, I'm going to call back with my football question.
It's funny about Metallica. I didn't even know that with Stranger Things. It's kind of interesting. No, I mean, hey, if there's a resurgence, do it now, because obviously their popularity waned, and if there's just even a tiny flurry, let's sneak it in. You know what I mean? But yeah, you're right, and I mean, you are right that there probably is some kind of you can't just go get the biggest names, because some of them won't do it. Right, some of them, like Taylor Swift, probably would just turn it down. Like, I hop on my plane for a year or however long, do a tour and make $1 billion. I'm not fishing for downloads or anything. It's kind of beneath me. Not too many people it's beneath. I mean, it is honor of a lifetime, and I'm sure before long she'll be doing a Super Bowl halftime show. Although after just getting booed, I'm not sure if she's going to want to come back. And it's going to be like a tradition, kind of like Roger Goodell at the draft. Anytime she's there now, you got to boo her. But you're right. It's got to be somebody that's big enough that the NFL wants you. Not too big though that they wouldn't do it for free. So probably a little bit on the downswing, kind of like the rap thing, where it was, some of the biggest names ever, but also maybe not the biggest right this second. Although Kendrick is, but I don't know, whatever. He's living up his flavor of the minute. I'm sticking with that, by the way. Let's get to part two for Umar.
What's going on? It's called my part two. But yeah, that's a lot of reasons why, you might not always get the top echelon great performers, because they'll make their money. But you got to also remember that they're doing a lot. I would like variety, but, being that hip-hop is like one of the most popular genres of the youth, that they do want to pull in viewers who don't always watch football. So they don't, just kind of like the NFL does, they don't really cater to necessarily to what the football fans might want to see all the time. It's all about advertising. Like Pepsi wants whoever the most famous, like if Taylor Swift did it, Pepsi would have a heart attack. They would love it, so they get more views advertising for Pepsi. So people just got to kind of realize that all part of the business of why they do it. Like I said, this one I like Kendrick, but I liked it. Like they said, I liked the second half of it versus the beginning half of the Super Bowl. And I can kind of understand. He kind of played a lot of his previous hits the last time he was at the Super Bowl, so he stuck to most of his new stuff, which a lot of people didn't know. But that also made him like a bunch of money.
Sure.
On Spotify, because a lot of people was looking up the song.
Yeah,
anyway, as far as my football question, what is your I want to hear your dream and realistic scenario. What is your dream scenario that the Packers could sign or trade for that would make the team, even more successful, but not like jack the team up? And then what is your budget friendly Costco? Hey, if we did this, we could realistically sign this person or this person, and it might not be the top tier, but they can improve our team dramatically. So I just wanted to hear your dream scenario, that you could do that is realistic, and then your budget-friendly realistic scenario. I think that would be a nice, sweet topic, and also give me some extra people to look at. So I would try to help a little bit. If you said, all right, well, we maybe trade for a lower DN or sign a free agent DN, then we don't have to draft a DN. We can draft another position to help, because this position should be there at the time of our draft, or vice versa, something like that. Or if we trade Alexander, which I really don't want, but trade Alexander for this, something like that. Give a little scenario of what your budget-friendly and dream scenarios would be. All right, thanks.
Probably going to depend on what you mean by budget-friendly, but I'm going to go ahead and take the easiest way out, but it is absolutely my answer. So my dream scenario as of right now is Max Crosby. That's my number one. I do think he's going to bounce back to what he was post-injury. He's only 27 years old. I think he's, when healthy, which is almost always, one of the best pass rushers in all of football. He is not Myles Garrett, but he is not far behind, and I think he would be less. Maybe I'm wrong as far as how much less, but I would think he'd be less. So that's currently my dream scenario. Khalil Mack isn't that far behind, partially just because he's such a freak, and it would be just an honor to have a guy like that on our team. Partially similarly, but partially because it reminds me very much of what we did previously with Julius Peppers. Very similar situation, except I think Khalil is significantly better than Julius Peppers was at the time that we got him. Just a freak that should be too old, but still has a bunch left in the tank because he's a freak. The fact that he's a former Bear, and he did the damage that he did to us, and now we get him, and he's going to go ahead and just give it right back to him. Everything. I mean, that's a very close second. And if you told me that he had 3-4 years left, that might be my new top option. But I'm going to stick with Max Crosby. And then the budget-friendly one that I don't know that it does a ton, but I think it could help us a little bit, plus it just would be very, very cool for obvious reasons, is Davante. Now, I don't know if it's really budget-friendly. I might be cheating a little bit because it's not super budget-friendly, but I do think he would come at a massive discount compared to what we would have paid had he agreed to our contract / what the Raiders ended up paying him. I think he's going to come at a significant discount from that. And it would just be so cool to get him back in the building. It really, I'm almost positive it's not going to happen. I really don't think it's going to, but I would love it. I would love to have Davante back. It was a painful experience for him to leave. Always wanted him to stay a Packer. He's such a fun guy to watch play. It was painful to watch him with the Raiders, just looking like Davante, doing Davante stuff, even with the Jets. He just looks like the way he moves, the way he catches the ball, everything is just like, oh man, we used to have that, dude, And he's not the Davante of old, but I'd love to get him back on the team. I'd love to see him, that jersey being along the sideline again. It would help us to not have to really panic about finding that X. I would still like to draft somebody, but it wouldn't be kind of something you'd have to panic for. So, I mean, if we can get Max Crosby and Davante, that's kind of been my thing since day one. Max Crosby and Davante would just be my dream. It really would. It's not to say that we couldn't possibly do better, but it's still my dream. So, that would be my ideal scenario. Let's screw it. Let's go with Drew's 2 calls here.
Hey Ryan, that's Drew from Green Bay.
What's up?
I just saw there were a whole slew of people players that got cut today,
Yes.
and I was just wondering if you know anything about them. I mean, I don't look into them, and I always, when guys get drafted and all of that, then I'm really into it, but then I kind of forget about them, and then when they go on other teams, I don't pay that close of attention. So, yeah, what were their careers like? Could anybody benefit us? I see, like, maybe Sheldon Rankins would be potentially one of the big ones, but I think he had some injuries, so I don't know. Were any of those guys, could they be potential and help our team, or not really? Thanks. Bye.
So I cover that tomorrow. The guys that ended up getting cut, Sheldon Rankins is, I mean, all of them essentially are a no for me. I'm happy that guys are getting cut. It just adds people to the pool, like I've been saying. But I think these are probably low-end guys. I want to say yes to somebody. I want to be like, well, I wouldn't mind the depth, and I guess I wouldn't. But it just feels more like a Ted Thompson pickup than what I'm hoping for Brian Gutekunst, who generally does a better job of finding actual impact guys. Whereas Ted Thompson's like, yeah, we have a need, so let's just get the cheapest, worst person we could possibly find that absolutely does nothing to raise the quality. That's a little unfair after just praising the Julius Peppers. But, we're talking late stage Ted Thompson, where it was just, what is even the point? Like, what the heck are we even doing here? That's kind of where I'm at with some of these guys like Sheldon Rankins that got cut. Old, injured, really low impact. I can't even say they've fallen off because they were never really super great, at least not anytime recently. So far, no big cuts that have got me super excited. All right, Drew, let's call this our last one.
Hey, Ryan, Drew from Green Bay again. I just had a question about, are there guys that you want to take off your board or that you really don't like? We always talk about who we like, but are there any that you're like way lower on everybody else than? A couple guys I have are Ersery, the Minnesota offensive lineman. I don't like him at all when I watched him. I actually had him rated, like, out of 14 tackles I watched, I had him last. And then the other guy is Membo from Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like, I don't completely hate him, but just where he's projected, I don't see him as, like, that 15th overall kind of guy. I think it's fallen a little bit, but, I have him as my 9th ranked offensive tackle, and I said one thing I didn't like is it seemed like he got confused a lot, and, like, when he would get downfield, he was, like, looking around, didn't seem to know who to block at times.
Sure.
But there are things to like about him, but there are just a couple things that, if you're talking about, like, an elite first-round prospect, I would expect a little more than that,
Yep.
So the guys that those are the two guys that I would really point out that I'm much lower than other people in the offensive tackle position. So anybody like that for you? All right, thanks. Bye.
I mean, it's still very early, and I haven't gone back in. I've been working on so many other things. My kid keeps asking me, like, where are you at? Where are you at? And he's ripping through all these positions. He just finished edge. Not quite finished, but he needs me to get him a few more film cut-ups. But, he just keeps asking. It's like, dude, I haven't even looked at it since, so I got to get back in. I'm staying engaged with it but it's more of like what other people are saying more so than my particular opinion. The one guy that does stand out in my mind that I just really didn't care for, I mean, I've talked about some of the guys that I'm worried about scheme-wise, like Jody Barron, for example, but that's kind of a separate thing. The guy that stands out is Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame, and he has actually fallen quite a bit. I didn't really realize it, but I just looked at it on the consensus board. He used to be right around where the Packers were at. I think he was right at 23, possibly even a little higher. Let me click on him here for a second. He's at 34 right now. So yeah, he was at 22. Looks like his peak was a long time ago, back in November. But he kind of was flattened out here. January 29th, he was at 22, and it has just been a plummet ever since. Dropped down to 25, then 27, 28, then 30, 31, and he's currently at 34. So he is just in a downward spiral, and I always feel somewhat vindicated when I see stuff like that, because I'll look at him and be like, I don't really get it with Benjamin Morrison. And then he just kind of just doing a dive here. Trying to think who else. Nobody really stands out. Again, I'm trying not to be too critical before I really put my official stamp on certain people. As far as the wide receivers, you know, I think it has more to do with I'm looking at it and I don't understand why so-and-so is better than this guy. You know, I've mentioned how I really like Trey Harris, who also I think is falling quite a bit. He's starting to show up more as like a third-round prospect from what I'm seeing, which I kind of understand, but I think if I'm right about his long speed, which I don't think anyone seems to agree with, I think he deserves to be a lot higher. His ability to really just sail past people. Otherwise, I understand it. He is not again, it's very similar to DK Metcalf. He's just not as big and as fast and as athletic, so it doesn't pop off. So take DK Metcalf, who the NFL was skeptical of, right? He fell in the NFL draft, and it was because of all the same reasons, right? Well, he's got a limited route tree, and I don't know. He's just kind of a big physical guy. Now you take this guy, and he's big, but he's not as big. He's not as physical. He's not as fast. So it makes sense that the NFL is like, I'm not a fan, but I am a fan. And then, as I said, like A.O. Manor, really big fan of A.O. Manor. And so when you look at like the first round guys, and it's like Luther Burden could be shortly after the top 10 he goes. I don't have a problem with Luther Burden, but it's like, really? Little slot guy? He's like a top 15 guy, and A.O. Manor is a mid-second round pick. That's what you're telling me? I don't know, man. I guess I don't get it. But again, I gotta finish the positions and then go back and do my second run through before I really start being super definitive. Because like last year with Edgerrin Cooper, I was very much, I don't get it. I really don't. I don't like him. I don't want him. I did my second run through, and a lot of times it's just a couple plays where you see something and you're like, wait a minute. And you kind of go back to that old adage for scouts, don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what he can do, or something to that effect. Because I think the principle really behind it is you're trying to see those traits. And it seems counterintuitive, or it seems like a bad idea, because you look at it and go, okay, so you did it once, so what? Right, but if you did it once, that means you can do it, and that's the point. And with Edgerrin, I started to see a couple plays where his closing speed, his ability to track people down and chase some really fast people he shouldn't have been able to catch, and just a couple things he did. It was same with Dontavian Wicks. He's terrible. He was awful. He was so lazy and slow and just like, what the heck? This is terrible. And there was one play where he had a route that I saw and I was like, what the heck was that? And again, it made sense to focus on that one because it means he can do it. Now, whether or not it translates, I don't know. But you see in Green Bay, obviously he has drop issues, which he had in college too. But we all acknowledge dude is a good route runner. So I guess if I had any wisdom to impart, now that I brought it up, really pay close attention, which can be hard because a lot of times these guys are boring and they're showing nothing, but really watch for that one thing, especially the more you do it, because you kind of get accustomed to this is what people do. This is how fast defensive linemen move. This is generally how often they win. This is da-da-da. And you start to notice little things like, oh, I don't think I've seen that before. And they kind of seem like they can't do something, and then they show you that they can, even if it's that one time. That might be all you really need, because I just need to know you can do it. That's it. That doesn't apply to everything, right? Like, well, you sacked somebody once, so that means you can do it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, do you have the physical ability to do X, Y, and Z? Because I think with a lot of these guys, and I think that's how scouts and coaches and everything else look at it as well, because they see it as, what do I have to work with? And if you have that ability, now it's just a matter of refining it and getting you to do it better and more often. But for the most part, a lot of guys, they just can't do stuff, and that's the thing. We got to figure out where your limitations are. But Anyways, I'm rambling now. You guys have a good rest of your day. Keep those calls coming. Again, we close to having enough for a full show, but I only got 2 calls left, so as you can probably tell, it wouldn't have been enough for a full show. So keep them coming. Well, nothing for last night. We'll see you about tonight. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.